The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Catherine's London townhouse as she sat at her mahogany desk surrounded by stacks of papers, photographs, and handwritten notes. Her fingers traced the elegant letterhead of Westminster Abbey, and a smile spread across her face. This year's Christmas celebration would be unlike anything she had ever organized before. Catherine had been planning this event for months, ever since the Dean of Westminster had approached her with an extraordinary opportunity. The Abbey, steeped in nearly 1,000 years of history, would open its doors for her annual Christmas gathering. It was a privilege that few could claim, and Catherine understood the magnitude of responsibility that came with it. She picked up her phone and dialed her assistant, Margaret, who had been working with her for over 15 years. Margaret's voice came through clearly, filled with the same excitement that Catherine felt. "Margaret, I need you to clear my schedule for the next 3 days. We have some incredible announcements to make, and I want everything to be perfect." "Of course, Catherine. Should I prepare the usual press materials?" "No. This is different. Much different. We're going to need something special for this announcement." Catherine walked to her window, gazing out at the bustling London street below. People hurried past, wrapped in their winter coats, their breath visible in the crisp December air. She thought about how many lives this celebration would touch, how many people would experience something truly magical within the sacred walls of Westminster Abbey. The idea had come to her during a quiet moment of reflection the previous spring. Catherine had been attending a memorial service at the Abbey when she was struck by the profound sense of community and shared humanity that filled the ancient space. She realized that Christmas, more than any other time of year, embodied those same feelings of connection and hope. Her annual Christmas celebration had grown from a small gathering of close friends into a significant event that raised substantial funds for various charities. Last year alone, they had collected over £200,000 for organizations supporting homeless families, elderly care facilities, and children's hospitals throughout London. Catherine's phone buzzed with a text message from her daughter, Sarah, who lived in Edinburgh with her own family. "Mum, are you still planning something big for Christmas this year? The children are asking if they can help again." Catherine smiled, remembering how her twin grandchildren, Emma and James, had insisted on helping with last year's event. They had spent hours making handmade decorations and had even performed a small concert for the guests. Their enthusiasm had been infectious, and many of the attendees had commented on how the children's joy had made the evening even more special. She typed back quickly, "Yes, darling, this year will be the most special yet. Tell Emma and James that Grandmama has something very exciting planned." Catherine returned to her desk and pulled out a thick folder labeled Westminster Abbey Guidelines. She had spent weeks studying every detail, from the acoustics of the nave to the proper protocols for events held in the sacred space. The Abbey's events coordinator, a distinguished gentleman named Thomas Whitfield, had been incredibly helpful in navigating the complex requirements. The Abbey could accommodate up to 2,000 guests in its nave, but Catherine had decided to limit the invitation to 800 people to ensure an intimate atmosphere. She wanted everyone to feel personally connected to the celebration, not lost in a crowd. Her vision extended far beyond a simple Christmas party. Catherine planned to incorporate elements that would honor the Abbey's rich history while creating new traditions. She had arranged for the Westminster Abbey Choir to perform, their voices echoing through the same space where kings and queens had been crowned for centuries. The guest list was carefully curated to include representatives from all walks of life. There would be members of Parliament alongside teachers, doctors next to artists and business leaders sitting beside volunteers from local charities. Catherine believed that the true spirit of Christmas lay in bringing together people who might never otherwise meet. She opened her laptop and began reviewing the catering arrangements. The challenge of serving a formal dinner within the Abbey's constraints had required creative solutions. A team of London's finest chefs had developed a menu that could be prepared off-site and served seamlessly within the sacred space. The main course would feature traditional British winter dishes with modern interpretations. Roasted beef with Yorkshire pudding, accompanied by seasonal vegetables sourced from farms within 50 miles of London. For those with dietary restrictions, there would be elegant vegetarian options that celebrated the harvest season. Catherine's attention to detail extended to every aspect of the evening. She had commissioned a series of floral arrangements that would complement the Abbey's Gothic architecture without overwhelming its natural beauty. White roses, holly, and ivy would create a winter wonderland that felt both festive and respectful of the sacred environment. The entertainment program was perhaps the most ambitious element of her planning. Beyond the choir performance, Catherine had arranged for readings by several prominent literary figures, including a beloved children's author who would share a specially commissioned Christmas story. She had also invited a renowned pianist to perform on a concert grand piano that would be carefully positioned in the nave. The acoustic properties of the Abbey would transform even simple melodies into something transcendent. Catherine's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed Thomas Whitfield from Westminster Abbey. "Catherine, I wanted to confirm our final walkthrough for tomorrow morning. Are you ready to see your vision come to life?" "More than ready, Thomas. I've been dreaming about this for months." "Excellent. I must tell you, the entire Abbey staff is excited about this event. We've never had such a thoughtfully planned Christmas celebration here." After ending the call, Catherine felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. She had organized countless events over the years, but none had carried the significance of this one. The Abbey represented not just a venue, but a connection to centuries of tradition and faith. She thought about her late husband, William, who had always supported her charitable endeavors. He would have been thrilled to see this dream realized. William had often said that Catherine had a gift for bringing people together, for creating moments of genuine human connection in an increasingly divided world. The charitable component of the evening remained at the heart of Catherine's planning. This year, proceeds would benefit 3 organizations that were particularly close to her heart. The first was a program that provided Christmas meals and gifts to homeless families, ensuring that no child in London would wake up on Christmas morning without something special. The second charity focused on supporting elderly individuals who might otherwise spend the holidays alone. Volunteers would visit senior centers and private homes, bringing not just gifts but companionship and conversation. The third organization worked with refugee families who were experiencing their first Christmas in Britain. Catherine had visited one of their community centers and had been moved by the resilience and hope she witnessed among people who had lost so much, but still found reasons to celebrate. Catherine walked to her living room, where a small Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with ornaments that held decades of memories. Each decoration told a story of Christmases past, of family gatherings and quiet moments of reflection. She picked up a delicate glass angel that had been her grandmother's. Catherine remembered hanging it on the tree as a child, standing on tiptoes to reach the perfect branch. Her grandmother had told her that angels watched over families during the Christmas season, bringing peace and protecting those they loved. As the afternoon light began to fade, Catherine returned to her planning. She reviewed the timeline for the evening, ensuring that every moment would flow seamlessly into the next. Guests would arrive at 5 o'clock for a reception in the Abbey's chapter house, where they could mingle and admire historical artifacts while enjoying champagne and canapés. At 6:30, everyone would move into the nave for the main program. The evening would begin with a welcome address, followed by the choir performance and readings. Dinner would be served at 8 o'clock, with the tables arranged in a configuration that encouraged conversation among strangers. Catherine had personally written place cards for each guest, taking care to seek people who might discover unexpected connections or shared interests. She believed that some of the most meaningful relationships began with chance encounters, and she wanted to facilitate as many of those moments as possible. The evening would conclude with a candlelit procession through the Abbey's cloisters, where guests could reflect on the experience and the approaching Christmas season. Catherine had arranged for each person to receive a small gift, a beautifully bound book of Christmas poetry that included works by writers who had been buried or commemorated in the Abbey. As night fell over London, Catherine felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Tomorrow's announcement would mark the beginning of something extraordinary. She had worked tirelessly to ensure that every detail reflected both the solemnity of the Abbey and the joy of the Christmas season. She thought about the hundreds of people who would gather in that sacred space, bringing their own stories, hopes, and dreams. For one evening, the Abbey would be filled not with the echoes of history, but with the living voices of a community celebrating together. Catherine's final task of the day was to review her announcement speech. She wanted to convey not just the logistics of the event, but the spirit behind it. This celebration represented her belief that Christmas could still bring people together, that in an age of division and uncertainty, there remained opportunities for genuine human connection. She practiced the words aloud, imagining herself standing before the assembled guests, sharing her vision for an evening that would honor both tradition and innovation. The Abbey had witnessed countless historic moments, and Catherine was humbled to add her own celebration to that legacy. As she prepared for bed, Catherine felt the excitement building within her. Tomorrow would begin the final phase of preparation, and soon her dream of hosting Christmas at Westminster Abbey would become reality. She knew that this celebration would create memories that would last long after the candles were extinguished and the last notes of the choir had faded into silence. The morning of the announcement dawned crisp and clear, with frost covering the windows of Catherine's townhouse like delicate lace patterns. She woke earlier than usual, her mind already racing with the day's schedule. Today would be the official revelation of her Christmas plans, and she wanted everything to be absolutely perfect. Margaret arrived at 8 o'clock sharp carrying a steaming cup of Catherine's favorite Earl Grey tea and a folder containing the final press materials. The two women had worked together for so long that they moved with practiced efficiency, each knowing exactly what needed to be done without lengthy explanations. "The journalists will arrive at 10. Margaret said, settling into the chair across from Catherine's desk. "I've confirmed attendance from The Times, The Guardian, BBC London, and several lifestyle magazines. The photographer from Tatler specifically requested to capture some shots of you with the Abbey in the background." Catherine nodded, though her stomach fluttered with nervous energy. She had given countless interviews over the years, but this felt different. She was about to share something deeply personal, a dream that had consumed her thoughts and energy for months. "What about the charity representatives?" Catherine asked, reviewing her notes one final time. "All confirmed. Sarah from the Homeless Family Charity will be here at 11, followed by representatives from the Elderly Support Program and the Refugee Assistance Organization. They're all eager to hear the details." Catherine stood and walked to her wardrobe, selecting a navy blue dress that struck the right balance between formal and approachable. She paired it with her grandmother's pearl necklace, a piece that always made her feel connected to the women who had come before her. As she dressed, Catherine thought about the ripple effects this announcement would create. By evening, news of the Westminster Abbey Christmas celebration would reach thousands of people across London and beyond. Some would be thrilled by the opportunity to attend, while others might question whether such an event belonged in such a sacred space. Catherine had anticipated these concerns and was prepared to address them thoughtfully. She genuinely believed that the Abbey's history of bringing communities together during times of celebration and mourning made it the perfect venue for a Christmas gathering focused on charity and human connection. The first journalist arrived precisely at 10, a young woman from The Times who specialized in society events and charitable causes. Catherine welcomed her into the sitting room, where Margaret had arranged fresh flowers and set out delicate china cups for tea. "Mrs. Catherine, thank you for this exclusive opportunity," the journalist began, settling into her chair with a digital recorder and notebook. "We understand you have some exciting news to share about your annual Christmas celebration." Catherine smiled, feeling her nervousness transform into enthusiasm. "Indeed I do. This year, I'm thrilled to announce that our Christmas celebration will take place at Westminster Abbey. It represents not just a change of venue, but an evolution of our mission to bring people together during this special season." The journalist's eyes widened with surprise and interest. "Westminster Abbey? That's quite extraordinary. How did you manage to secure such a prestigious location?" Catherine explained the months of discussions with Abbey officials, the careful planning required to respect the sacred nature of the space, and her vision for creating an event that would honor both tradition and contemporary needs. "The Abbey has always been a place where communities gather during significant moments," Catherine continued. "From royal weddings to memorial services, it has witnessed humanity at its most profound. I believe that Christmas, with its message of hope and goodwill, belongs in that tradition." The interview continued for nearly an hour, with Catherine describing her plans in detail while being careful not to reveal every surprise she had planned. She wanted to maintain some mystery while generating enough excitement to ensure strong attendance. As the morning progressed, Catherine met with representatives from the 3 beneficiary charities. Each conversation reinforced her conviction that this event could make a meaningful difference in people's lives. Sarah Matthews, who ran the Homeless Family Program, was particularly moved by Catherine's plans. "Catherine, you can't imagine what this means to us. The families we serve often feel invisible, forgotten by society. To know that their needs will be highlighted in such a magnificent setting, it gives them dignity and hope. The representative from the elderly support charity, an energetic woman named Dorothy Phillips, shared similar sentiments. Many of our clients have lived in London their entire lives, but have never had the opportunity to attend an event at Westminster Abbey. You're giving them something they'll treasure forever. The Refugee Assistance Coordinator, a thoughtful man named Ahmed Hassan, spoke about the symbolic importance of welcoming newcomers to Britain in such a historically significant location. The Abbey represents the best of British tradition and hospitality. For refugee families to be included in this celebration sends a powerful message about belonging and acceptance. By afternoon, Catherine felt energized by these conversations. The practical details were important, but hearing about the human impact reminded her why she had undertaken this ambitious project in the first place. Thomas Whitfield called to confirm their walkthrough appointment the following morning. "Catherine, I've been receiving calls from various media outlets. Word is spreading quickly about your announcement. Are you concerned?" Catherine asked, hoping she hadn't created problems for the Abbey. "Quite the opposite. The Dean and I are pleased to see such positive interest. We believe this event will demonstrate that the Abbey remains relevant and welcoming to all members of the community." Catherine spent the remainder of the afternoon finalizing guest invitations. She had decided to send them by hand rather than electronically, believing that a physical invitation would convey the specialness of the occasion. Each envelope was addressed in elegant calligraphy, and the invitations themselves were printed on heavy paper with gold embossing. The invitation text had been carefully crafted to capture both the formality of the venue and the warmth of the celebration. "Mrs. Catherine Elizabeth requests the honor of your presence at a Christmas celebration in aid of charitable causes. Join us at Westminster Abbey for an evening of music, reflection, and community fellowship as we gather to support families in need during the holiday season." Margaret had arranged for a team of volunteers to help address and stuff the envelopes. Catherine's dining room had been transformed into an assembly line, with women from various charitable organizations she supported working together with cheerful efficiency. As the volunteers worked, Catherine moved among them, sharing stories about some of the invited guests and explaining her vision for the evening. She was struck by how these women, many of whom had never met before, fell easily into conversation and collaboration. Mrs. Henderson, a retired teacher who volunteered at several literacy programs, paused in her work to comment on the invitation list. "Catherine, I'm amazed by the diversity of people you're inviting. I see names I recognize from Parliament sitting next to others I know from community centers in East London." "That's exactly the intention," Catherine replied. "Christmas should remind us that we're all part of the same human family, regardless of our backgrounds or circumstances." As evening approached, Catherine reflected on the day's accomplishments. The announcement had been well received by the media. The charity partners were enthusiastic about the opportunities ahead, and the invitation process was proceeding smoothly. She walked to her study and opened the window, letting in the cool December air. The street below was illuminated by Christmas lights that local residents had strung between their townhouses, creating a warm glow that made the entire neighborhood feel magical. Catherine thought about her own journey to this moment. She had been born into privilege but had learned early that true satisfaction came from using her advantages to help others. Her parents had instilled in her a sense of responsibility to give back to the community, and she had carried that lesson throughout her life. Her late husband, William, had shared those values completely. Together, they had supported numerous causes and had taught their children the importance of service to others. William would have been thrilled to see this Abbey celebration come to fruition, and Catherine felt his presence strongly as she planned the final details. The telephone rang, interrupting her reflections. The caller was her daughter Sarah, who had just seen news coverage of the announcement on the BBC. "Mom, I just watched your interview. I'm so proud of you. This is incredible. Westminster Abbey." Emma and James are beside themselves with excitement. Catherine smiled, picturing her grandchildren's enthusiasm. "I hope they'll still want to help with the preparations." "Are you joking? They've already started making new decorations. Emma wants to know if she can meet the Archbishop of Canterbury." Catherine laughed. "I'll see what I can arrange. Actually, I do have a special role in mind for both of them, if you think they'd be interested. They'll be thrilled." "What did you have in mind?" I'm planning a special moment during the evening when children will light candles representing hope for the coming year. Emma and James could participate, along with some children from the charities we're supporting." Sarah's voice grew warm with emotion. "Oh, Mum, that's beautiful. They would be honored to be part of something so meaningful." After ending the call, Catherine felt a deep sense of contentment. This celebration was bringing together not just her community, but her family across generations. The children's participation would add a layer of innocence and joy that would make the evening even more special. She returned to her desk and began working on the evening's program. Each element needed to flow seamlessly into the next, creating an experience that felt both spontaneous and carefully orchestrated. The opening would feature the Westminster Abbey choir performing traditional Christmas carols, their voices soaring through the ancient stone arches. Catherine had specifically requested pieces that would be familiar to most guests, creating an immediate sense of shared experience. Following the musical opening, there would be readings from various religious and secular traditions, all focusing on themes of hope, compassion, and community. Catherine had invited speakers from different faiths to participate, reflecting London's diverse spiritual landscape. The centerpiece of the evening would be the lighting ceremony involving the children. Each candle would represent a different aspect of hope, for families finding homes, for elderly people finding companionship, for refugees finding belonging, and for communities finding peace. Dinner would be served in a configuration that encouraged conversation among strangers. Catherine had worked with a seating consultant to ensure that the tables would facilitate meaningful connections while accommodating various dietary requirements and accessibility needs. The evening would conclude with a procession through the Abbey's cloisters, where guests would have opportunity for quiet reflection. Catherine envisioned this final moment as a bridge between the celebration and the approaching Christmas season, sending people home with renewed appreciation for both tradition and possibility. As she prepared for bed, Catherine felt profound gratitude for the opportunity to create something that honored both her personal values and the Abbey's sacred mission. Tomorrow's walkthrough would bring her vision one step closer to reality, and she could hardly contain her excitement about sharing this extraordinary experience with her community. The morning of the Westminster Abbey walkthrough arrived with a light dusting of snow, transforming London into a winter wonderland that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Catherine stood at her bedroom window, watching the delicate flakes settle on the bare branches of the plane trees lining her street. The sight filled her with a sense of anticipation that made her heart race. She dressed carefully in warm, practical clothing, knowing that the Abbey would be cold and that they would be walking through various sections of the ancient building. Margaret had already arrived and was waiting in the kitchen with a thermos of hot coffee and a folder containing detailed floor plans and vendor contact information. "Are you ready for this, Catherine?" Margaret asked, studying her employer's face for signs of nervousness. Catherine smiled, pulling on her woolen coat. "I've been ready for months. Today we finally get to see our vision in the actual space." The drive to Westminster Abbey took them through the heart of London, past Hyde Park where early morning joggers left footprints in the fresh snow, and through the busy streets of central London where Christmas shoppers were already beginning their day despite the early hour. As their taxi approached the Abbey, Catherine felt her breath catch in her throat. The Gothic towers rose majestically against the gray sky, and the ancient stones seemed to glow with an inner light. She had visited the Abbey countless times over the years, but seeing it now as the venue for her Christmas celebration made it appear almost mythical. Thomas Whitfield was waiting for them at the Dean's Yard entrance, bundled in a heavy overcoat and wearing a warm smile. At 65, he had been coordinating events at the Abbey for over 20 years and had developed a reputation for handling even the most complex occasions with grace and precision. "Catherine, Margaret, welcome," he said, extending his hands in greeting. "I must say, this snow adds quite a magical touch to our planning session." Thomas led them through a side entrance that Catherine had never used before, explaining that this route would allow them to experience the space as her guests would on the evening of the celebration. The corridors they walked through had witnessed centuries of history, and Catherine felt the weight of that legacy with every step. "Before we enter the nave," Thomas said, pausing at a heavy wooden door, "I want you to understand something important about this space. Westminster Abbey has been a place of worship for over 900 years, but it has also always been a gathering place for the community. Your Christmas celebration continues that tradition in a very meaningful way." When Thomas opened the door and they stepped into the nave, Catherine gasped audibly. The soaring stone arches seemed even more magnificent than she remembered, and the morning light filtering through the stained glass windows created patterns of color on the ancient floor that took her breath away. "This is where your guests will gather for the main program," Thomas explained, gesturing toward the central aisle. "We can accommodate your 800 guests comfortably with excellent sight lines from every position." Catherine walked slowly down the nave, imagining it filled with people from across London's diverse communities. She could almost hear the sound of conversation and laughter echoing off the stone walls. Picture the warm glow of candlelight reflecting off the Gothic arches. "The acoustics here are extraordinary," Thomas continued, leading them toward the area where the choir would perform. "Even without amplification, voices carry clearly throughout the entire space. Your musical program will be heard beautifully from every seat." Margaret was taking detailed notes, measuring distances and angles with a practiced eye. She had coordinated events in challenging venues before, but nothing quite like this. "Thomas, what about catering logistics? How do we serve dinner for 800 people in a space like this?" Thomas smiled, clearly having anticipated this question. "Follow me, and I'll show you our solution." He led them to the chapter house, octagonal room that adjoined the main abbey. "This will serve as our preparation and service area," he explained. "The catering team will have everything they need here, and service can flow seamlessly into the nave through this connecting passage." Catherine examined the chapter house with growing excitement. The medieval stone walls were decorated with beautiful carved details, and she immediately envisioned how the space could be transformed into an elegant reception area for the beginning of the evening. "Could we hold a champagne reception here before the main program?" she asked, already picturing guests mingling among the ancient architectural details. "Absolutely. In fact, I think it would be perfect. Guests can admire the 13th century architecture while enjoying drinks and conversation before moving into the nave for dinner." They spent the next hour walking through every aspect of the evening's logistics. Thomas showed them where tables could be positioned to maximize both the acoustic experience and the visual impact of the abbey's architecture. Catherine was pleased to discover that her vision of long tables encouraging conversation among strangers would work perfectly in the space. The positioning for the evening's musical performances required careful consideration. The Westminster Abbey choir would perform from their traditional location in the choir, but the solo pianist would need to be positioned where the instrument's sound would carry effectively throughout the nave. "We've arranged for a concert grand piano to be brought in specifically for your event," Thomas explained, indicating a spot near the altar where the instrument would have maximum acoustic impact. "The pianist you've chosen is familiar with our space and has performed here before." Catherine felt a thrill of excitement imagining the sound of piano music filling the ancient space. She had specifically chosen pieces that would complement the Abbey's spiritual atmosphere while remaining accessible to guests from all backgrounds. As they continued their walkthrough, Thomas shared stories about other significant events that had taken place in the Abbey. He spoke about royal weddings that had filled the space with celebration, memorial services that had brought comfort to grieving nations, and Christmas services that had marked important moments in British history. "Your celebration will become part of this continuing story," he said thoughtfully. "Long after your guests have gone home, this evening will remain part of the Abbey's legacy of bringing people together during meaningful times." The conversation turned to the specific charitable aspects of Catherine's event. Thomas was particularly interested in hearing about the 3 organizations that would benefit from the evening's fundraising efforts. "The Abbey has always had a mission of service to the community," he said. "We're honored that your celebration will support such important causes." Catherine described her visits to the homeless family shelter, the elderly care facilities, and the Refugee Assistance Center. Each organization had touched her deeply, and she was eager to create an evening that would not only raise funds but also raise awareness about the ongoing needs in London's communities. "I want our guests to leave here with a deeper understanding of how they can make a difference," Catherine explained. "This celebration isn't just about having a lovely evening in a beautiful space. It's about inspiring people to take action." Thomas nodded approvingly. "That spirit aligns perfectly with the Abbey's mission. We found that events with genuine purpose create the most meaningful experiences for everyone involved." They moved on to discuss the evening's program in detail. Catherine had planned for brief speeches from representatives of each charity, But she wanted these presentations to be inspiring rather than overwhelming. The focus would remain on celebration and community, with the charitable component woven naturally throughout the evening. The candlelit procession through the cloisters that would conclude the evening required special attention to both safety and atmosphere. Thomas showed them the route that guests would follow, pointing out architectural details that would be illuminated by the soft glow of individual candles. "This final element of your program is particularly beautiful," Thomas observed. "The cloisters have been a place of reflection and contemplation for centuries. Your guests will have an opportunity to experience that same sense of peace and purpose." Catherine was moved by the idea of her guests walking where countless others had found solace and inspiration over the centuries. The procession would provide a bridge between the celebration's joyful energy and the quiet reflection that the Christmas season encouraged. As their walkthrough continued, Margaret raised practical questions about logistics, timing, and contingency planning. She had learned over the years that successful events required attention to countless details that guests would never notice if everything went smoothly. "What about coat check facilities?" Margaret asked, ever practical. "We have a solution for that as well," Thomas replied, leading them to another adjoining space. "This area can accommodate all your guests' winter clothing, with professional attendants to ensure everything runs smoothly." Catherine was impressed by how thoroughly the Abbey staff had considered every aspect of hosting her event. Their experience with complex occasions was evident in their ability to anticipate and address potential challenges before they became problems. The discussion turned to decoration and ambiance. Catherine had spent considerable time developing a vision that would enhance the Abbey's natural beauty without overwhelming its historic character. She wanted her celebration to feel special and festive while remaining respectful of the sacred space. "I'm thinking white roses, holly, and ivy," Catherine explained, gesturing toward various locations where floral arrangements could be placed effectively. Nothing that would compete with the architectural details, but enough to create a sense of Christmas celebration. Thomas approved of her restraint. "The Abbey's beauty speaks for itself. Your approach of complementing rather than competing with the architecture shows great sensitivity." They spent considerable time discussing lighting, which would be crucial to creating the right atmosphere. The Abbey's ancient stone absorbed light in interesting ways, and Catherine wanted to ensure that the evening felt warm and inviting rather than cold or forbidding. "We can supplement the existing lighting with subtle additions that will enhance the space without altering its character," Thomas explained. "Candles will play an important role, especially during the concluding procession." As their walkthrough neared its end, Catherine felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Every concern she had harbored about adapting her vision to the Abbey's requirements had been addressed thoughtfully and creatively. The venue would not only accommodate her celebration but would elevate it to something truly extraordinary. Thomas led them to his office where they could review final details over tea and shortbread biscuits that his assistant had prepared. The office walls were lined with photographs from significant Abbey events over the decades, and Catherine studied them with fascination. "Your event will join this gallery of memories," Thomas said, noticing her interest. "Every celebration held here becomes part of the Abbey's ongoing story." Catherine felt humbled by the thought. Her Christmas celebration would indeed become part of a legacy that stretched back centuries, connecting her efforts to countless others who had gathered in this sacred space to mark important occasions. As they prepared to leave, Thomas handed Catherine a leather-bound book about the Abbey's history. "I thought you might enjoy reading about some of the Christmas celebrations that have taken place here over the years. It might give you additional inspiration for your own event." Catherine accepted the gift gratefully, already eager to explore its contents. The more she learned about the Abbey's rich tradition of bringing communities together, the more confident she became that her celebration belonged in this magnificent setting. The snow was falling more heavily as they emerged from the Abbey, transforming Westminster into a scene that seemed lifted from a Christmas card. Catherine looked back at the Gothic towers rising into the gray sky and felt a profound sense of gratitude for the opportunity to create something meaningful in such an extraordinary place. The days following the Westminster Abbey walkthrough passed in a whirlwind of activity that left Catherine both exhausted and exhilarated. Her townhouse had been transformed into a command center, with every room serving a specific purpose in the complex orchestration of the upcoming celebration. The morning brought news that exceeded even Catherine's most optimistic expectations. Margaret burst into the breakfast room waving a stack of RSVPs that had arrived with the early post. "Catherine, you won't believe the response," Margaret said, her usually composed demeanor giving way to obvious excitement. "We've already received over 300 confirmations, and the invitations only went out 2 days ago." Catherine set down her teacup, feeling a mix of delight and nervous anticipation. "That's wonderful news, but also a bit overwhelming. We need to make sure we're prepared for everyone who wants to attend." The guest list read like a cross-section of London society, but not in the traditional sense. Catherine had deliberately sought to bring together people who might never otherwise meet, creating opportunities for unexpected connections and conversations. There was Sir Geoffrey Hamilton, a retired judge who had spent decades working in family court, sitting next to Maria Santos, a young teacher who worked in one of London's most challenging neighborhoods. Lord and Lady Pemberton, known for their charitable work with veterans, would share a table with Ahmed Hassan from the Refugee Assistance Organization and several families who had recently arrived in Britain seeking safety. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, who ran a medical clinic in East London, had accepted with enthusiasm, as had Jonathan Mills, a successful businessman who had grown up in the same neighborhood where Dr. Harper now served patients who couldn't afford private care. Catherine smiled, imagining their conversation and the potential collaborations that might emerge. The artistic community was well represented, with invitations accepted by celebrated novelist Dame Rebecca Thompson, whose latest book explored themes of community and belonging, and Marcus Williams, a young composer who had grown up in care and now used music to help other disadvantaged youth. Religious leaders from across London's diverse faith communities had also confirmed their attendance. The Archbishop of Canterbury would deliver one of the evening's readings, alongside Rabbi Sarah Cohen, Imam Muhammad Ali, and Sister Catherine Mary from the Catholic Diocese. Catherine felt particularly pleased that her celebration would demonstrate London's rich spiritual diversity while honoring the Abbey's own Anglican tradition. Margaret had set up a detailed tracking system to manage the complex logistics of guest management. Each confirmation was logged with dietary requirements, accessibility needs, and any special requests. Catherine was touched by how many guests had included personal notes with their acceptances, expressing gratitude for the invitation and excitement about the evening. Mrs. Dorothy Phillips from the Elderly Support Charity had written, "My dear Catherine, I cannot express how thrilled I am to attend your celebration. At 84, I never imagined I would have the opportunity to dine at Westminster Abbey. This will surely be one of the most memorable evenings of my life." A response that particularly moved Catherine came from James and Helen Morrison, a couple who had recently lost their home and were staying in temporary accommodation with their 2 young children. "We are honored to be included in such a special event," Helen had written. "Our children are beside themselves with excitement. Thank you for reminding us that we are part of a community that cares." The catering arrangements were progressing smoothly under the direction of Chef Patricia Williams, one of London's most respected culinary professionals. Catherine had chosen Patricia not only for her exceptional skills, but for her understanding of how food could serve as a bridge between different cultures and communities. Patricia had developed a menu that honored traditional British Christmas fare, while incorporating flavors that would feel welcoming to guests from various backgrounds. The main course would feature perfectly prepared roasted beef with all the traditional accompaniments, but there would also be elegant vegetarian options inspired by Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisines. "Food tells stories," Patricia had explained during one of their planning sessions. "I want every guest to find something on our menu that feels both special and familiar." Catherine appreciated this thoughtfulness, knowing that many of her guests might feel nervous about attending such a formal event. The food would serve as common ground, creating shared experiences that could spark conversation among strangers. The morning also brought exciting news about the entertainment program. Dame Emma Richardson, one of Britain's most beloved actresses, had agreed to participate in the evening's readings. She would perform excerpts from Dickens's A Christmas Carol, bringing the classic story to life in the same city where it was written and set. "I can think of no better setting for Dickens than Westminster Abbey," Dame Emma had told Catherine during their telephone conversation. "The themes of redemption and community that run through his Christmas story align perfectly with what you're trying to achieve." Catherine had also finalized arrangements with the renowned pianist Alexander Chen, whose innovative interpretations of classical pieces had earned him international recognition. Alexander would perform a selection of Christmas music that ranged from traditional carols to contemporary compositions, including a piece he had written specifically for the Abbey celebration. I've been studying the acoustics of Westminster Abbey for months, Alexander had explained. The space itself will be part of the performance, adding resonances and echoes that you can't achieve in any other venue. The Westminster Abbey Choir had been rehearsing intensively, and Thomas Whitfield had assured Catherine that their performance would be something truly special. The choirmaster had selected pieces that would showcase both the group's exceptional talents and the Abbey's legendary acoustics. Ephron's phone rang, interrupting her review of the evening's program. The caller was her daughter Sarah, checking in from Edinburgh where she was managing her own holiday preparations. "Mum, how are you holding up? Emma and James are practically bouncing off the walls with excitement about coming to London for your celebration." Catherine smiled, picturing her energetic grandchildren. "I'm doing well, though I must admit I'm feeling the pressure. This event has grown beyond anything I originally imagined." "That's because you have a gift for inspiring people," Sarah said warmly. "Everyone wants to be part of something you're creating because they know it will be meaningful." Sarah's words provided exactly the encouragement Catherine needed. Sometimes, in the midst of managing countless details, she lost sight of the deeper purpose behind all the planning and preparation. The afternoon brought a delightful surprise in the form of an unexpected visitor. Ahmed Hassan from the Refugee Assistance Charity appeared at Catherine's door, accompanied by a shy young girl of about 10 years old. "Mrs. Catherine," Ahmed said, "I hope you don't mind our dropping by unannounced. I wanted you to meet Layla, one of the children who will benefit from your celebration. She has something she wanted to give you personally." Layla stepped forward and handed Catherine a carefully wrapped package. Inside was a small ornament that the girl had crafted from colorful paper and ribbons, depicting an angel with outstretched wings. "I made this for your Christmas tree," Layla said in careful English, her voice barely above a whisper. "My family comes from Syria, and my grandmother always said that angels watch over people who help others." Catherine felt tears well up in her eyes as she accepted the delicate gift. "Thank you, Layla. This is one of the most beautiful ornaments I've ever received. Would you like to see where I'll hang it on my tree?" Layla's face brightened as Catherine led her to the sitting room, where the Christmas tree stood. Together, they found the perfect spot for the angel ornament, and Catherine explained how it would remind her every day of the real purpose behind her Abbey celebration. Ahmed watched the interaction with obvious emotion. "This is what we mean when we talk about the impact of your event," he said quietly. "Children like Layla feel seen and valued when the community embraces their families. Your celebration sends a powerful message about belonging." After Ahmed and Layla left, Catherine sat quietly in her sitting room, looking at the angel ornament and reflecting on the afternoon's visit. These moments of personal connection reminded her why she had undertaken this ambitious project in the first place. The evening brought another important planning session, this time focused on the media coverage that would surround the event. Catherine had agreed to limited press access, understanding that publicity would help raise awareness for the 3 beneficiary charities. The BBC would have exclusive television rights to document selected portions of the evening, while several print journalists would be allowed to attend as guests rather than as working press. Catherine had insisted that any media presence should enhance rather than detract from the intimate atmosphere she was trying to create. "We want coverage that honors both the celebration itself and the causes it supports," Catherine explained to the media coordinator. "This isn't about creating a spectacle, but about sharing a story of community and hope." The publicity strategy included plans for follow-up coverage in the weeks following the event, focusing on how the funds raised would be used by each charity. Catherine wanted to ensure that the celebration's impact would extend far beyond a single evening. Margaret had also arranged for a professional photographer to create a lasting record of the celebration. The photographs would be shared with guests as mementos, but they would also serve as documentation for future fundraising efforts and community outreach. As the evening wound down, Catherine reviewed the detailed timeline that would guide the celebration. Every moment had been carefully planned, from the arrival of guests at 5 o'clock to the final candlelit procession at 10:30. The evening would begin with the champagne reception in the chapter house, where guests could admire medieval architecture while enjoying elegant canapés and getting acquainted with one another. Catherine had arranged for subtle background music provided by a string quartet, creating an atmosphere that was festive but conducive to conversation. At 6:30, guests would process into the nave for the main program. The Westminster Abbey choir would open with a selection of traditional Christmas carols, their voices soaring through the ancient stone arches. The musical program would continue with Alexander Chen's piano performance, followed by the dramatic readings. Dinner would be served at 8 o'clock, with Catherine providing a brief welcome that would acknowledge the evening's charitable purpose while setting a tone of celebration and gratitude. Representatives from each beneficiary charity would have opportunities to share short presentations about their work. But Catherine had insisted that these segments remain brief and inspirational rather than lengthy or overwhelming. The highlight of the evening would be the candlelighting ceremony involving children from various backgrounds. Emma and James would participate alongside Layla and several other young people whose families had been helped by the evening's beneficiary organizations. Each candle represents hope for the coming year, Catherine had written in her speaking notes. Hope for families finding homes, for strangers becoming neighbors, for communities discovering their strength through shared purpose. The celebration would conclude with the procession through the Abbey's cloisters, where guests would have opportunities for quiet reflection as they walked where centuries of pilgrims had found peace and inspiration. Catherine felt deeply satisfied with how all the elements were coming together. Every detail had been considered not just for its practical necessity, but for its contribution to the overall experience she wanted to create. As she prepared for bed, Catherine walked through her house, turning off lights and checking that everything was secure for the night. In each room, evidence of the celebration planning was visible. Lists on desks, fabric samples on tables, floral sketches pinned to bulletin boards. Tomorrow would bring the final week of preparation, with last-minute confirmations, final fittings for her own dress, and the delivery of decorative elements to Westminster Abbey. Catherine felt ready for the challenges ahead, sustained by her conviction that this celebration would create something truly meaningful for everyone involved. Standing at her bedroom window looking out at the quiet London street dusted with snow, Catherine felt profound gratitude for the opportunity to bring her vision to life. The Westminster Abbey Christmas celebration had evolved from a personal dream into a community effort that would touch hundreds of lives in ways she was only beginning to understand. The morning of the Westminster Abbey Christmas celebration dawned with crystalline clarity, the kind of crisp December day that seemed designed for momentous occasions. Catherine woke before her alarm, her mind immediately alert despite the early hour. Today, months of planning would transform into reality. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom windows, illuminating the elegant dress that hung carefully on her wardrobe door. She had chosen a deep midnight blue gown with subtle silver embroidery that would complement both the solemnity of Westminster Abbey and the joy of the Christmas season. The dress had been her grandmother's, worn to important occasions throughout the 1950s and carefully preserved for special moments. Margaret arrived at 7 o'clock carrying an impressive folder containing the final timeline, emergency contact information, and backup plans for every conceivable scenario. Her usual calm efficiency was seasoned with barely contained excitement. "Everything is ready, Catherine," Margaret announced, setting down a breakfast tray with Catherine's favorite morning tea and fresh pastries from the French bakery down the street. The florists arrived at Westminster Abbey at dawn, the catering team began their preparations at 6, and Thomas Whitfield called to confirm that all systems are functioning perfectly. Catherine sipped her tea slowly, savoring both the Earl Grey blend and the momentous nature of the day ahead. Through her window, she could see neighbors hurrying past bundled in winter coats, many carrying wrapped packages that suggested last-minute Christmas shopping expeditions. The telephone began ringing at 8 o'clock with calls from various team members confirming their readiness. Chef Patricia Williams called to report that the kitchen was operating smoothly and that the menu looked absolutely spectacular. Alexander Chen called from Westminster Abbey, where he was conducting a final sound check with the concert grand piano that had been specially positioned for optimal acoustics. "The instrument sounds magnificent in this space," Alexander told Catherine. "I've never performed in a venue with such extraordinary resonance. Your guests will experience something truly special tonight." Dame Emma Richardson called to confirm her arrival time and to express her anticipation for the evening's readings. "I've been practicing Dickens in my garden all week," she said with characteristic warmth. "My neighbors probably think I've gone quite mad, but the words feel so alive when spoken outdoors." Catherine spent the late morning in quiet preparation, taking a long bath with lavender oil to calm her nerves and clear her mind for the evening ahead. She had learned over years of event planning that these moments of personal ritual helped her maintain composure during complex celebrations. As she dressed, Catherine reflected on the journey that had led to this day. The idea of holding her Christmas celebration at Westminster Abbey had seemed almost impossibly ambitious when it first occurred to her. Yet here she was, preparing to welcome 800 guests to one of the world's most sacred and historic spaces. Margaret helped Catherine with the final details of her appearance, including the pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother and matching earrings that caught the light beautifully. Catherine had decided to wear her hair in an elegant updo that would complement the vintage style of her dress while ensuring she looked both formal and approachable. Sarah arrived from Edinburgh at noon with Emma and James, who immediately filled Catherine's house with youthful energy and excitement. The twins had spent weeks preparing for their special role in the evening's candlelighting ceremony, and they could barely contain their enthusiasm. "Grandmama, will we really light candles in Westminster Abbey?" Emma asked for what must have been the 100th time since learning about the celebration. "Yes, darling," Catherine replied, kneeling to adjust the collar of Emma's special dress. "You and James will help light candles that represent hope for children and families throughout London." James, always the more serious of the twins, asked thoughtful questions about the charities that would benefit from the evening. Will the families without homes really get Christmas presents because of tonight? Catherine explained how the money raised would help provide not just Christmas gifts but also longer-term support for housing, food, and educational opportunities. She was touched by the children's genuine concern for others less fortunate. The afternoon brought a stream of final preparations that kept Catherine's household busy but focused. The car service that would transport Catherine and her family to Westminster Abbey confirmed their arrival time. The security arrangements were reviewed one final time with Thomas Whitfield and the Abbey's professional staff. Catherine took a few moments to review her evening speaking notes, though she had memorized most of her remarks weeks earlier. She wanted her words to convey both gratitude for the community's support and inspiration for continued charitable action beyond the celebration. At 4 o'clock, Catherine received a call that brought tears of joy to her eyes. Mrs. Dorothy Phillips from the Elderly Support Charity was calling from Westminster Abbey, where she had arrived early to help with final preparations. "Catherine, my dear, I'm standing in the chapter house watching the final preparations, and I must tell you that what you've created here is absolutely breathtaking. The flowers are exquisite, the lighting is warm and inviting, and there's a feeling of anticipation that's simply magical." Catherine felt a wave of relief and excitement wash over her. After months of planning and preparation, hearing that her vision was successfully coming to life felt like the most wonderful gift she could have received. As 5 o'clock approached, Catherine and her family made their final preparations to leave for Westminster Abbey. Emma and James were resplendent in their special outfits. Emma in a velvet dress the color of winter roses, and James in a miniature formal suit that made him look remarkably grown up. Sarah looked beautiful in a dress of forest green that complemented her mother's midnight blue gown. "Mom, I'm so proud of what you've accomplished," she said as they waited for their car to arrive. "Dad would be absolutely thrilled to see this evening come to fruition." The mention of William brought a bittersweet moment of reflection for Catherine. She felt his presence strongly as they prepared to leave for the celebration, and she knew he would have been deeply moved by the community spirit that had made this evening possible. The drive to Westminster Abbey took them through London streets decorated with Christmas lights and bustling with holiday activity. From the car window, Catherine watched people hurrying home from work, families window shopping, and children pointing excitedly at elaborate store displays. The city felt alive with seasonal energy that perfectly complemented her celebration's joyful purpose. As their car approached Westminster Abbey, Catherine felt her breath catch at the sight of the ancient building illuminated against the darkening sky. Warm light glowed from within the Gothic windows, and she could see elegantly dressed guests beginning to arrive for the champagne reception. Thomas Whitfield was waiting at the Dean's Yard entrance to greet Catherine and her family personally. "Welcome to your celebration, Catherine," he said with obvious pleasure. "Everything is ready, and our first guests have already commented on how magnificent the chapter house looks." Catherine stepped into Westminster Abbey feeling a profound sense of accomplishment mixed with nervous excitement. The chapter house had been transformed into an elegant reception space, with carefully placed floral arrangements that complemented the medieval architecture without overwhelming its ancient beauty. White roses, holly, and ivy created sophisticated displays that caught the warm light beautifully. Round cocktail tables were positioned throughout the space, each topped with smaller arrangements that encouraged guests to mingle and move freely during the reception hour. The string quartet was positioned discreetly in one corner, their music providing an elegant soundtrack that enhanced conversation rather than dominating it. Catherine recognized the pieces they were playing. Classic Christmas melodies arranged in sophisticated harmonies that felt both festive and refined. As guests began to arrive in larger numbers, Catherine was thrilled to see the diverse community she had worked so hard to assemble. Sir Geoffrey Hamilton was deep in conversation with Maria Santos, the young teacher from East London. Lord and Lady Pemberton had immediately gravitated toward Ahmed Hassan and were listening intently as he described his work with refugee families. Dr. Elizabeth Harper had found Jonathan Mills, the businessman who had grown up in her neighborhood, and Catherine could see them comparing notes about how their area had changed over the decades. These were exactly the kinds of connections Catherine had hoped to facilitate. The religious leaders formed an interesting group near the medieval stone carvings, with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Rabbi Cohen, Imam Ali, and Sister Catherine Mary engaged in animated discussion about their various traditions' approaches to Christmas celebration. Dame Rebecca Thompson was surrounded by admirers eager to discuss her latest novel, while Marcus Williams, the young composer, was explaining his work with disadvantaged youth to several potential new supporters. Catherine moved through the reception with growing satisfaction, observing conversations that ranged from light holiday topics to serious discussions about community challenges and opportunities. She paused frequently to welcome guests personally, ensuring that everyone felt valued and included. The sight of families who had struggled with homelessness and economic hardship mingling comfortably with London's most privileged residents moved Catherine deeply. Her strategy of creating an elegant, welcoming atmosphere had succeeded in making everyone feel equally important and respected. As the reception hour drew to a close, Thomas Whitfield approached Catherine with a warm smile. "Are you ready to move into the nave? Your guests are eager to experience the main program." Catherine nodded, feeling both nervous excitement and profound gratitude. The procession from the chapter house into Westminster Abbey's nave would mark the true beginning of her Christmas celebration, transforming months of planning into a lived experience for 800 members of her community. Standing at the threshold between the reception space and the historic nave, Catherine felt the weight of tradition and the possibility of new connections. Her Christmas celebration at Westminster Abbey was about to become reality, creating memories and relationships that would extend far beyond this single magical evening. As guests began to move toward the nave, Catherine heard Emma whisper excitedly to James, "This is really happening! We're really going to light candles in Westminster Abbey." Catherine smiled, knowing that this celebration would indeed become a cherished memory for her grandchildren and for everyone who had gathered to support their community during the Christmas season. The evening she had dreamed about for so many months was finally beginning.